Hi everyone. I believe for us to make significant progress in our health, we need to take mass courageous action. And I've been contemplating a lot recently of what the prerequisites are to take this mass action. So I'll be doing a series of 3 videos. The first one today is about our dedication to see reality as it really exists. The second one is about the correction of blind spots, that's called balancing. And both of these are 2 of the 4 pillars of discipline described by Scott Peck in this book. And then the third video is about our awareness of existing as a self and as part of the group. And then finally, I believe when we have those bits of information, we are ready to take courageous action. So something I became aware of about 12 years ago when I first took a Myers-Briggs personality assessment test is that our consciousness has blind spots. We tend to perceive in one direction. And these are some of the directions just sort of described in the test. So the first letter of your results will be an E or an I. When you have a cognitive function, is it happening out in the world? Is it in actions, behaviours, or is it internally in reflection and ideas? And so that's an E or an I. Then when you perceive information, when you gather information, is it through your senses? Is it through sight, touch, feeling? Are you gathering information, or are you getting it through your gut, through intuition, through your sixth sense? That's S or N. And then when you make a decision, is it through rational, logical thought, T, or is it through taking account of what will be the best outcome for everyone involved? Is it an F? And finally, when you relate to the outside world, do you prefer to do it through decision making, J, or through gathering information, P? And a really interesting thing about this assessment is the concept of a dominant function. So one of these combination of letters is the way that we prefer to relate. It's our dominant function. We're most confident in it. It's our most conscious function. And for me, that is extroverted feeling. So making decisions out in the world, taking people into account. But when our arrow is pointing in one direction, it seems to me the life force is an arrow pointing in one direction, we get a blind spot on the other side. And in times of stress, a really interesting thing happens. We tend to flip the arrow. We tend to look in the other direction. So in times of stress, I could go inside and start making decisions through thinking, rational decisions. But because our inferior function isn't one that we are used to using, it tends to be quite clunky when we have that stress reaction. And it seems to me that if consciousness is an arrow of our life force pointing in one direction, the unconscious is more like a 360 view. It's a dissipation of the life force. And in that moment, when we're looking in one direction and there's something going wrong, it's like our unconscious is saying, look over here, have a look in this direction, that might be something important. And this is a really interesting graph from this book mentioned below. And it's a map of the psyche based on Carl Jung's work. And Carl Jung believed that the inferior function was a route into the unconscious. So the dominant function sat in consciousness, and the inferior function gave us information about the unconscious. And I see this concept of this feeling of life force being an arrow cropping up all the time. And another one to mention is how Scott Peck mentions in his book that I described, the concept of responsibility. He describes that we all tend to be either neurotic or character disordered to some extent. So neurotic people, if they're having a neurotic issue, tend to take on too much responsibility. They tend to say, what did I do? Oh. The life force arrow points inward. What did I do wrong now? What have I done? How's this my fault? Whereas character disordered people tend to feel the responsibilities all outward. They take too little responsibility. They tend to say, what have you done now? Look what you've done. This is all your fault. And to get flexibility, to close that blind spot in life, we have to learn to turn the arrow around. And if we have been on the neurotic end in an issue, and we've been saying, this is all my fault, it is a relief when we turn it around and say, actually, this one was yours, that was yours. But we mustn't get too smug, because we can all become neurotic and character disordered about different issues. And there might be another one that we discover is actually, that was mine, that was mine. So learning to have that flexibility to move the arrow. Is this mine or is this yours? It's not only our psychological type that gives us blind spots. I've represented that here. So if we're only focused in our dominant function, if we don't give any energy to filling in that blind spot, or at least surrounding ourselves with people who can see into that blind spot, you can see if these are a pair of glasses of our vision of the world, or our perception of the world, we're getting quite there's blind spots all over this view. But not only that, also how we exist in the drama triangle. If we are getting into the drama triangle and having a preferred role, we're seeing this pattern coming again and again in our lives. And also there is our behaviours, the habits that create blind spots. There is our programmed beliefs and identity that have blind spots, and our level of consciousness. So if you look at all these negative emotions that I've described here, surrounding our whole view,